Typically, these are folks doing reality shows about adoption or foster care, and you just don't want to touch any of that with a 10-foot pole. But this immediately felt different. In fact, I was on the phone with Sean in that initial call, looking him up, like, who is this guy? Is he legit? And he was legit. I went, oh, Daddy's home, so he's a real thing. But what was most meaningful to me and most important was that he was an adopted dad and adopted 3 kids from foster care himself. So when he said he wrote a script and was doing some research and wanted some assistance, at that point I said, let's go. I was all in. I've been pretty deeply involved since the beginning. This is really a passion of mine, in particular, kids in care. So having something like this, an opportunity to bring foster care and adoption on the national narrative, where folks are going to be interested in talking about it, an unbelievable opportunity for our kids and families. For me, that's everything. That's actually why it feels as authentic as it does, and it resonates so deeply with our families. And I mean, our families that are in foster care, that have adopted from foster care. Every time we've screened it to our families, I mean, they walk out in tears, and I mean good tears. They walk out going, this is the first time we have seen anything that is our story up on the big screen. So for them, it's a game changer, because to be an adoptive family or a foster family, all the movies you go to see are about other people's families or other kinds of families. To see kind of their truth kind of up on the screen, and not just the rough side of it, the difficult side of it, but the humor and the love and the full story needed to come from an adopted dad, which it did. There's a level of authenticity to it that I just don't think could have ever happened anywhere else. One of the things you need, I think, to do this well is a sense of humor and levity and finding joy in difficult circumstances. And our parents tend to do that really, really well. And the way that they support each other is through that. You actually see that in the movie, in the support group scenes. Those are funny scenes, and that's actually really what it's like. If you came to our group, you'd actually see parents lovingly finding joy and laughter in some of these really difficult moments. It's what allows them to get up the next day and jump back in and do what they need to do, to be the best parents that they can be for our kids. We screened the film at the North American Council on Adoptable Children, NACAC, and that is the national conference on all things, about adoption and foster care. So it is the big organization. I was really nervous because I've been involved in NACAC for 15 years, and it's a great organization, and it does great great work on a national stage, if you will, and a lot of the influencers in the field are there. So I was actually not nervous to do my workshops, really nervous about the movie and how it would be received by folks in the field, folks in child welfare and folks in foster care and adoption. And by the way, half the folks there are adoptive families and foster families, and half the folks are professionals and leaders of organizations. So we had Adopt US Kids, and you have Casey Family and Children's Bureau, and you have a lot of big organizations there. So I was really nervous. When we get there, we already feel like some buzz around, what is this movie? Like, you could hear folks go, we know nothing about this movie, but we're just gonna, we're gonna go. And it was really neat to be there. In fact, I was telling Sean, because we were sitting really watching everybody else's reaction, and at that point had seen it 4 times. There wasn't one other screening that got the reception that it did there throughout the entire movie. People were really laughing, like these guttural laughs, especially around moments that, if you're not an adoptive parent or foster parent, you might be like, oh, I don't know if we can laugh at that. Can we laugh at that? And our parents laugh, like belly laugh, like that is the funniest thing I've ever seen, and that's real. So watching it with 400 people that are in the field and or foster adoptive families was unbelievable. You could tell at every moment they were resonating so deeply with the movie. It just spoke to them. And at the end of it, and I'd never experienced anything like this, they all leaped up, like went crazy for this movie. I mean, I'm like, you know, wiping my tears off. I look over at Sean and he's doing the same, and we're like, oh my gosh. So I went from like nervous, anxious to like, oh gosh, like I'm not going to be hated and I'm not going to have the scarlet letter, or, you know, it's actually going to work out really well. Sean then went down and did a Q&A with folks, and he said, to have it be received from this community in particular, from the adoption community, from the foster care community, to have it be received in that way meant everything to him. And that's the way it feels. And to have it at this point have the momentum that it has, you know, our hope is, you know, this is really the game changer. This is going to put foster care and adoption on the national stage, and we want to really leverage that to open people's hearts so they're interested in, you know, what could I do for a kid in foster care? Could I be a foster parent? Could I mentor? What could I do? We can all do something, right? You know, you see Lizzie in the movie. She's a what we would call kind of a parentified kid. She's the parent, and she's not going to give up that role very easily. Like, she's been their parent, so why would she just let some strangers? That's her feeling. Why would she let some strangers parent the kids? So there's a scene in there. There's a dining room table scene where it doesn't go very well because she's like, "Oh, I'll let you guys parent. You go go ahead." And it gets messy really quickly because Lita wants her potato chips, and she's gonna like dig her heels in, and that's a great scene because tons of things happen at the end where she comes up with her SpongeBob, you know, knife with a ketchup on it, and she's all a mess. Got huge guffaws because I think every parent has those moments, especially when you're newly parenting kids that you don't know that well. You don't know what their triggers might be. So you can see it, that they're learning through the process. And what they got at the end of that scene, which I loved, is, Lizzie, help us here. We're going to need you, right? We need you to help us learn about how to best parent the kids. Like, you know, they're becoming kind of a we in those moments. They're becoming a family in those moments. Imagine going from 0 kids to 3 kids. And these are already kids with, you know, they're already little personalities with thoughts and feelings, and they've been through a lot. So they're not going to be your average kids. How the parents step into those parenting roles is often trial and error and making a lot of mistakes. And hopefully hanging in there and laughing along the way is a really good way to make it work. We tend to think about kids in foster care as like somebody else's problem. Like, hey, somebody's taking good care of those kids, right? The government's taking good care of those kids, or somebody else. I don't really have to think about that because somebody else is taking care of those kids. And I would say, don't make that assumption because, you know, the government's a government, and we have programs, and most of our programs are, you know, sometimes underfunded. Struggling. We have an opioid epidemic, so we have a lot of issues right now. We have more kids coming into care, so these aren't somebody else's problem. We could all get more involved. In fact, that's one of the big things I'm hoping the movie kind of challenges us all to do, is to think about what we each could do to make it different for kids in care. Many of our kids in foster care feel invisible in their communities. They feel like people don't see me. Like, who's claimed me? Who do I belong to? Where do I fit in? And because the term foster care is so negative and has so many negative stereotypes, kids are not proud of their foster care status. They're not. It's usually something they want to hide, that they're embarrassed about, that they're ashamed of. To tell your teacher or your neighbor or anyone that, hey, I'm a kid in the system, or I'm in foster care. It's often embarrassing for them. It's stigmatizing for them. So for us, we're hoping that when folks not connected to the system at all see the movie, they walk away and go, oh my gosh, like, look at those great kids. Because our kids in the system, before they're anything else, are kids. Kids, just like all other kids. You know, they're kids first. In my initial conversation with Sean, it was, you know, I didn't know anything about this world of foster care and adoption. And he said, when I jumped in and learned about it and then adopted our amazing kids that we have 3 beautiful kids, it changed me. And he said, people don't know about foster care and about foster care and adoption. And I want to make a movie that actually brings it to everyone. And no, adoption's not for everybody and fostering's not for everybody, but we have families right now that would be open to fostering and adopting that we're not tapping into because we're not putting it out there in the right way. So, and because he's a storyteller and because he's a movie maker, he can make an amazing, funny movie that I think does 2 things. One, it opens your heart on the one hand, and will allow us to put this thing called foster care and adoption on the national narrative. And those 2 things, I think, are huge. You would never wish getting stuck in foster care on anyone, your worst enemy. You'd never wish that. We have kids stuck in foster care that are worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. Where am I moving to tomorrow? Where's that next place going to be? It's a horrible childhood, and too many kids are getting stuck in foster care. So our hope is that this movie gets more folks interested in at least learning about, what would that be like to be a foster parent or adoptive parent? And if you can't do that, can you mentor? Can you tutor? Can you volunteer? Can you donate? Can you fill backpacks? Everybody could do something to help our kids in the system feel more cared about and loved.